Let's talk about these firewalls around our EC2 instances. So we briefly configured one in the previous lecture, but security groups, yet again, are going to be fundamental into doing network security in the AWS cloud. They will control how the traffic is allowed into and out of your EC2 instances. Security groups are going to be very easy. They only contain allow rules, so we can say what is allowed to go in and to go out. And security groups can have rules that reference either by IP addresses, so where your computer is from, or by other security groups. So as we'll see, security groups can reference each other. So here, let's take an example. We are on our computer, so we are on the public internet, and we're trying to access our EC2 instance from our computer. We are going to create a security group around our EC2 instance, that is the firewall that is around it, and then this security group is going to have rules. And these rules are going to say whether or not some inbound traffic, so from the outside into the EC2 instance, is allowed, and also if the EC2 instance can perform some outbound traffic, so to talk from where it is into the internet. Now, let's do a deeper dive, right? Security groups are a firewall on our EC2 instances, and they're going to regulate access to ports. They're going to see the authorized IP ranges. Would it be on IPv4 or IPv6? These are the two kinds of IP on the internet. This is going to control the inbound network, so from the outside to the instance, and the outbound network from the instance to the outside. And when we look at security group rules, they will look just like this. So they will be the type, the protocol, so TCP, the port allowing it, so where the traffic can go through on the instance, and the source, which represents an IP address range. And 0.0.0.0/0 means everything, and this here means just one IP. So you're not expected to know how to properly configure a security group for the cloud practitioner exam, but they're so important, so I want to talk about them. Now let's look at the diagram, right? So we have our EC2 instance, and it has one security group attached to it that has inbound rules and outbound rules. So I've separated them onto this diagram. So our computer is going to be authorized on, say, port 22, so the traffic can go through from our computer to the EC2 instance. But someone else's computer that's not using my IP address because they don't live where I live, then if they try to access our EC2 instance, they will not get through it because the firewall is going to block it, and it will be a timeout. Then for the outbound rules, by default, our EC2 instance for any security group is going to be by default allowing any traffic out of it. So our EC2 instance, if it tries to access a website and initiate a connection, it is going to be allowed by the security group. So this is the basics of how a firewall works. Now, good to know. What do you need to know with security groups? Well, they can be attached to multiple instances, okay? There's not a one-to-one relationship between security group and instances, and actually an instance can have multiple security groups too. Security groups are locked down to a region/VPC combination, okay? So if you switch to another region, you have to create a new security group, or if you create another VPC, and we'll see what VPCs are in the later lecture, well, you have to recreate the security groups. The security groups live outside the EC2, so as I said, if the traffic is blocked, the EC2 instance won't even see it, okay? It's not like an application running on EC2, it's really a firewall outside your EC2 instance. To be honest, and that's just an advice to you from developer to developer, but it's good to maintain one separate security group just for SSH access. Usually SSH access is the most complicated thing, and you really want to make sure that one is done correctly, so I usually separate my security group for SSH access separately. If your application is not accessible, so timeout, so we saw this in the last lecture, then it is a security group issue, okay? So if you try to connect to any port and your computer just hangs and waits, that's probably a security group issue. But if you receive a connection refused error, okay, you actually get a response saying connection refused, then the security group actually worked, the traffic went through, and the application was errored or it wasn't launched or something like this. So this is what you would get if you get a connection refused. By default, all inbound traffic is blocked and all outbound traffic is authorized. Okay. Now there is a small advanced feature that I really like, and I think it's perfect if you start using load balancers, and we'll see this in the next lecture as well, which is how to reference security groups from other security groups. So let me explain things. So we have an EC2 instance, and it has a security group, what I call group number 1. And the inbound rules is basically saying I'm authorizing security group number 1 inbound and security group number 2. So why would we even do this? Well, if we launch another EC2 instance and it has security group 2 attached to it, well, by using the security group run rule that we just set up, we basically allow our EC2 instance to go connect straight through on the port we decided onto our first EC2 instance. Similarly, if we have another EC2 instance with a security group 1 attached, well, we've also authorized this one to communicate straight back to our instances. And so regardless of the IP of our EC2 instances, because they have the right security group attached to them, they're able to communicate straight through to other instances. And that's awesome because it doesn't make you think about IPs all the time. And if you have another EC2 instance, maybe with security group number 3 attached to it, well, because group number 3 wasn't authorized in the inbound rules of security group number 1, then it's being denied and things don't work. So that's a bit of an advanced feature, but we'll see it when we'll deal with load balancers because it's quite a common pattern. I just want you to know about it. Again, just remember this diagram, and by now you should be really, really good at security groups and understand them correctly. Now, going into the exam, what ports you need to know? Well, we need to know something called SSH, or Secure Shell, and we're going to see this in the very next lectures. This is the port 22, and this allows you to log into an EC2 instance on Linux. You have port 21 for FTP, or File Transfer Protocol, which is used to upload files into a file share. And you have SFTP, which is also using port 22. Why? Well, because we're going to upload file, but this time using SSH because it's going to be a secure file transfer protocol. Then we have port 80 for HTTP, and we've been using it in the previous lecture. This is to access unsecured websites. And you've seen this whenever you go on the internet and you enter http:// and then the address of the website. And you've seen most likely a lot more like this. You've seen HTTPS, which is to access secured websites, which are the standard nowadays. And for HTTPS, it is port 443. Finally, the last port you need to remember is 3389 for RDP, or the Remote Desktop Protocol, which is the port that's used to log into a Windows instance. Okay, so 22 is SSH for a Linux instance, but 3389 is RDP for a Windows instance. Now, this is all the theory about security groups. I will see you in the next lecture for some practice.